Welcome back to Country Cow Designs. I'm Jo, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make the passenger backpack. So this is a new pattern that when it's released is exclusive to the Bag of the Month Club. I'll link that in the video description. If you've not heard of Bag of the Month Club, it's a lot of fun. It's a 3-month subscription that you join and you get 3 different brand new patterns. From about January 2026, you will be able to get the pattern on the website as well, but it's exclusive until then. So this backpack is an advanced sewing pattern. I definitely don't recommend trying it for your first bag. You really want to have some bag making experience before you give this a go. So this is a brilliant travel bag. We have tested it thoroughly. This fella has gone around Europe with us for a bit. So we've got lots of features that we added as we were doing the prototyping to try and make it as useful as possible for traveling. So that means there's loads of options. And when you get the pattern, you will see on the preparation stage, it will tell you which pockets and everything are optional. Go ahead and skip any that you don't need because it's great to have all of the features like these do, but it is going to take you a while to cut it out and make it. So this is a really fun bag to make, but obviously it's not going to be a quick one. So just some features. We've got zip pockets on the front and slip pockets too. This one's a little bit sandy. It's been at the beach with me. So you can easily fit your phone, sunglasses, things like that in these pockets and the zip pockets. We have got drinks bottle pockets on the sides, one on each side, one for your hot drink, one for your cold. We've got this nice tie top closure, so it folds down. This means that you can kind of really pack it out and you can still kind of get the bag to close. So that is a feature I really like, but it does make it faffy to get into the bag. So we have a solution for that. On the back, we've got these ties for zips. These are totally optional, and bear in mind you need like a hoop zip to make this work. So this goes into the main compartment of the bag and you've got access to everything inside the bag here and another drinks bottle holder just there. I like to keep hydrated. You've also got a luggage sleeve here, so this fits on top of your rolling luggage bag. It's really helpful when you're traveling long distance, so that's really helpful. And then on this side we've got a large laptop pocket. So this fits a standard 14-inch laptop, so that's quite big, really handy, and it's padded so that your laptop's got extra protection. And obviously when this is against your back, it's difficult for people to get in, so it's a really secure bag too. So we've got padded straps on the back that are adjustable and a grab handle. And then let's have a look at the inside. We have got a big slip pocket that we've sewn into 2. So you've got 2 big slip pockets here on one side, and underneath them you have card slot pockets. So it's difficult to show you from here, but we've got a few card slot pockets and pen holders as well. And on the other side, we've got a large mesh zip pocket. So this is an expandable mesh pocket, which is great if you're going to stuff it full of things. It can be any size you want. And it's got a zip top closure. That's as well as the bottle pocket on the inside. So loads of pockets to choose from. You can, of course, skip all of these interior pockets if you don't want them. So one thing I will say about this pattern, it is almost entirely rectangles. There is only one pattern piece, and that's the base that has some slight curves on it. You can still cut that out as a rectangle and then just use like a jam jar or something to create your curves if you want to. So you don't even need to print it. If you don't have a printer, that is absolutely fine. You can measure and cut the whole thing. Use the cutting chart. It's really helpful. It will tell you which pattern pieces to interface, what size every pattern piece should be. It will save you printing like 50 pages of pattern pieces. So grab your quilting ruler and a rotary cutter. It will be way quicker and easier to cut your pattern pieces out using the cutting chart. This bag does get bulky, particularly around the base, so make sure that you follow the interfacing on the cutting chart. It will have an asterisk to mark which pattern pieces need interfacing. Please do make sure that you follow that. We also have a couple of steps throughout the pattern where we trim little bits out. It makes a huge difference. Otherwise you're going to get to the end and your base is going to be impossible to sew on. So just please bear in mind the interfacing we've recommended is quite important if you want to have an enjoyable sew. So as usual, the pattern has been through a lot of testing. The pattern testers have been amazing. They tested all of the options, came up with some great little ideas and amendments, which were really, really helpful. So thank you so much to those guys. You can see their pattern, their finished bags on the website, give you a bit of inspiration on ideas of what you can do. They use all sorts of different materials, so that's really helpful. The pattern is also available in French as well as English on the website. And we're gonna have kits for them too, which will be in this style. It will be a slightly less oily oilskin because this one is quite oily, which is great for waterproofness, but it's a little bit oily to work with, as you'll see in this video tutorial. The kits will include everything, including the printed pattern, and the printed pattern is available on our website as well as the digital pattern if you prefer. So if you want to sew along with me for the first 3 months, you've got to be a member of the Bag of the Month Club. So download your pattern and get cutting. And after that, from January, you can grab the pattern from our website, countrycowdesigns.com. If you would like to see these bags in person and get an idea of what they look like and what they feel like to wear, then we have an open day on the 1st of November 2025 here at the shop, and you can come and see everything for yourself in person. So I'm just going to lastly show you what this looks like on. Bear in mind, I'm not a small person. I'm 5'11". So it is a really good size. You can fit a lot in it when you're traveling. So hopefully this is going to be the travel bag for you. I hope you enjoy making it, and let's get started. Step 1 is preparation. So I strongly recommend reading the preparation section before you begin. It's in the pattern on page 5, and it goes through all of the options, fabric recommendations, printing your pattern, all those kind of things. So this pattern is almost entirely rectangles, so you can just print the cutting chart and cut everything from that. And you can even cut the base that way if you want to, so you don't actually have to print anything if you don't have a printer. But if you do have a printer, I would recommend just printing the base piece because it has curves. But if you don't have it, then this preparation section tells you how to cut the curves. So there's loads of options in this pattern. If you add them all, it's going to take longer to make the bag. So if you want a quick easy bag, you can skip a few things. You can skip the front pockets, the zip and slip pockets. You can skip the bottle pockets. You can skip the interior pockets. You can skip the zip safety cords. These are only applicable if you have zips that have some kind of cutout so that you can, feed it through as well, but they're for added security. You can skip the luggage sleeve. You could skip the grab handle if you want to. So there's lots of things that you can skip if you want to make the bag quicker. So all of those are listed on page 5 in the preparation section. Now, the thicker the fabrics that you use, the more difficult this is going to be. There is a lot of layers going into the base, so I would recommend, if you want to use cork or vinyl, only use it for the main panels and perhaps the side panels, but then just be really careful what fabrics you choose for all of your pockets because the layers will build up. So again, follow the cutting chart in the pattern. It will tell you what to interface, what not to interface. And the reason for that is so that you don't end up with a chunk of interfacing in the base, which would make it really hard to sew the base on at the end. Okay, so have a good read through preparation, and then we're going to move on to step 2. Step 2 is the exterior front panel. So for this step, you're going to need your 13-inch zip, 2 zip pulls, 3 rivets if you're using them. You're going to need your full size lining zip pocket and your short size lining zip pocket. So these two both don't have any interfacing on them. Then you've got your exterior front slip pocket and your exterior front zip pocket. Now, if you haven't cut your pattern pieces out yet, I highly recommend looking at the page 4 of the pattern where it shows like the bag layout and it highlights which pattern piece is which. It makes it way easier when you're planning your fabrics. Then you're going to have your 2 lower closure straps, your exterior front center strip and your exterior main panel. So the first thing you're going to do is grab your exterior zip pocket. So that's pattern piece L. We're going to place it right side up. We're going to place the zip right side down on top of the top edge there. And we're just going to baste that top edge. You're now going to grab your shorter lining pocket piece. So you're going to place it right sides together with the exterior fabric. So these are the 2 right sides, they're together. the zip is sandwiched between them, and just clip them together on that top edge. And we're just going to sew that top edge alongside the zip. The standard seam allowance throughout the pattern is 3/8 of an inch. So when you're working with these fabrics that aren't interfaced, you will get like a tiny bit of stretch. Just don't worry about it. It's really not a problem, and you can always trim it out if it bothers you. So what we're going to do is press both fabrics away from the zip. You can use an iron to do this if you're working with cotton fabrics. And we're just going to top stitch this edge here. So you're now going to grab your other zip pocket piece and you're going to place it right side up. So this is the right side. Place this right side up on top. Just line up those top edges and clip them together. If you have any overhang here, just trim it down. This is just an extra allowance, just in case you've used a different seam allowance up here or something like that. So I just like to leave a little bit extra. It's easier to trim than to add something on. So we're now going to baste this top edge. Okay, so you're now going to grab your slip pocket piece. So this is an exterior fabric, and what we're going to do is place it right sides together, so everything's right sides together, and line it up again with that top edge. And now we're going to sew that top edge. So we're now going to push the slip pocket piece up away from the zip. So you want to kind of get like a nice neat finish here on the zip, and you should have the same seam allowance going on top and bottom. Now if you already put your zip pulls on, don't worry, that is fine, but I prefer to sew mine and then put the zip pulls on. So I'm going to do mine afterwards. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to bring it down so that it's lined up with everything else, okay, on the bottom edge, and clip it together. Okay, so all your pocket pieces are kind of meeting up at the bottom, and you're going to end up with this little accent piece at the top, okay? So we just press it all flat and then give that a good press so that you've got yourself a nice neat top trim, like so. What we're going to do now is we're going to top stitch just here by the zip, and then we're going to top stitch the top edge as well. So you can see that it is top stitched through both sides. Now you want to add your zip pulls if you haven't already. So I actually just like to unclip it to do this because I find it's a bit easier if I can kind of access the edge of the zip. So if you've not used continuous zip tape before, it can be awkward the first time, but once you get used to it, it gets easier and easier. You just feed a little bit through each side and then put it on a flat surface and tug. So what we want, if you've got a big like bulge on one side, then you know it's not quite right and you just want to take it off and put it on again. But we just want one zip coming from each side because we're going to split this pocket later. And I love it that the zips are closing toward each other. So of course, if you don't want your zips closing toward each other, you could have them both closing in the same direction. That's up to you. But you want them coming toward the center, but don't actually put them in the middle because that will make it awkward to sew your front strip. So actually I can see a tiny kink here. You see how it's not quite straight here? So I'm just going to whip that one off and do it again. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is clip all the layers together again. So we're going to baste the sides, but we're not going to baste the 2 inches at the bottom. And I do recommend basting both in the same direction, because if you do one down and one up, you can get a bit of stretch and your pocket can be slightly wonky. So set your pocket aside for a minute and grab your 2 lower strap closures. Now these should be interfaced if you're using cotton, because you want them to be not really thick, but a little bit thick so that they grip well on the strap sliders. Otherwise, if they're too lightweight, they will slip and open when you're using the bag. So the first thing that we're going to do, as my fabric's quite thick, I'm not going to interface it. So I'm going to fold over one short edge by 1/2 inch. Do the same with both pieces. So if you have a wrong side of the fabric, which you normally would, you're folding it over to the wrong side. So this is the wrong side right now. So what we're going to do is just trim a little bit out of the corner on these folds, because we don't want it kind of getting too bulky. It's just going to make it sit neater and look neater on this edge. So we're going to do the same thing with both. I'll just show you on one. Now what I'm going to do is mark a line up the center of this. So we're still on the wrong side of the fabric. We're drawing this line. Or for me, I'm marking it with an awl because I'm using oilskin. So it will make a nice line for me. So I'm going to fold the long edges into the line and start at your short folded edge. So you can make sure that's nice and neat because that's the edge that's going to be on show. The other edge won't be. And just fold it into that middle line. So it's almost touching the middle line, but you can just see it still. Now fold over the other side to match. And you don't want these overlapping, you want like the tiniest little gap down the middle. So now you can fold it again on the center line. Make sure that your edges are all nicely lined up. Give it a good press. Again, if you're using cotton, not oilskin, then you could just use an iron for this to press it. But if you're using something like faux leather, you're probably going to want to use some double-sided tape. But watch out for faux leather as it could be too thick for your strap sliders, in which case you'll need to use special thick strap sliders. So just be aware of that. So I'm going to do the same thing with my second one, and then I'm going to stitch all the way down the long edge across and back up using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to do it again using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So it's going to have 2 rows of stitching on the long edges. Okay, so once your straps are done, you're just going to mark them. Now, if you have a pretty side and a not so pretty side, so for example, if your stitching looks really good on this side, but sometimes your bobbin stitching just doesn't look as neat, or for me, you know, my oil's not settled yet. Whatever way it is, just choose the side that's kind of not quite as pretty, and then you're going to mark it 12 inches up from the raw edge. So this is your short raw edge that you've still got here. So go ahead and mark it 12 inches across. Now you need to grab your exterior main panel. We're going to get ready to fit these. So what you want to do is mark a line down this center of this main panel, and then you're going to mark 2 more lines, and they're going to be 3.5 inches out from the center in each direction. I've marked my lines on my oilskin, so don't worry about the lines. They'll mostly be hidden, and where they're not, with oilskin, you can just warm up the canvas afterwards and it will melt away the line, which is brilliant. That's why I like working with this sort of fabric. Okay, so you're going to grab your lower straps and you're going to place them so that the raw edge is on the bottom. Okay, so if you've got a directional fabric, this is the bottom edge and this is right side up. So we're going to place it inside the line. So the line's here. And we're going to sew with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance up across that little line that we drew and back down. We're going to do the same thing with this one, just inside of the other line. So your 2 lower strap closures are going to be sewn on like this, and they're going to be sewn up to the 12-inch mark. So if you're worried about stitching over your 1/8 of an inch stitching, don't, because this is going to have a pocket on top of it, and then when this is closed, it's going to be coming down hanging like this. So all of this stitching is going to be hidden from view when the bag is closed. So what you're going to do next is grab your pocket and you're going to place it on top. So it's on top of this bottom edge here. Everything is facing right side up, and you just want to clip those together. Now, before you sew this, what you're going to do is you're going to lift up just this top piece here. See, this is why we didn't baste it right to the bottom. We're going to draw a triangle in this bottom corner here. Okay, it's about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches-ish. Doesn't need to be exact. We're going to sew straight over this line here, and we're going to do the same thing on this corner. So we're sewing down all the layers except for this top layer. Okay, so you're going to want to skip this step, but I really recommend you don't. You're going to be so glad you've done this when you get to the end and you have to attach the base. So what you're going to do is keep the front piece away and the back piece away, and you're just going to trim out all the middle layers of this triangle, and this is going to seriously reduce the bulk in the base later. So all you're going to have left is the front and the back layer in the corners. Okay, so now we are ready to clip everything together, and we're going to baste the sides and the bottom edge. Again, I'm going to baste both of my sides in the same direction so that if there's any stretch, that they move at the same amount and I don't end up with a skew-if pocket. So set that aside for a moment and grab your front center trim. Your front center strip is going to need a line down the middle of it, just the same as we did with the lower strap closures. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark that. And now fold the long edges right into that center line and give it a good press. So this is the wrong side of the fabric that we're folding it into. So now on the front, you will have the right side of the fabric and your long edges won't be raw. So you're going to grab your front panel, and this is simply going to be sewn right over the center like this. So just make sure it's centered, and we're going to sew up the long edges. Going to top stitch them. This will separate this into 2 slip pockets and 2 zip pockets. Of course, if you do not want to put a front center strip on, that's okay, but I would recommend sewing up here and just having a stitch line just to separate your pockets. Otherwise, this is going to be quite a gapey pocket. Another option would be to put a magnetic snap on it, of course, but what I'm going to do is go ahead and add my front center strip. If you're using a fabric like vinyl or cotton, you could just stick it down with a strip of double-sided tape. That will make it easier to sew. If you're using a fabric like oilskin that just doesn't work with the adhesive products, then I would recommend drawing the line where it needs to sit. So that'll be 3/8 of an inch out from the center down there, and then you can hold it in place as you sew, making sure that it's just on the line. That's how I do mine. So now if you want to, you can add some rivets, but these are totally optional. I like to add 1 rivet through the center here, and then I also like to add 1 on each strap closure just below the stitching. Don't do it above because it'll be too high. So you want it just below. And for this one, I'm going to use a limited edition rivet because it's kind of cool. So I'm going to take that over to the hand press and set them, and then we're ready to move on to the next step. Step 3 is the straps. For this step, you're going to need your foam padded straps, your exterior padded strap pieces, your 2 exterior strap anchors, and your 2 little pieces of webbing, your 2 long pieces of webbing, and your 2 ladder locks. So the first thing that you want to do is draw a line down the center of your foam for both pieces. Then grab your straps. Now, if you have a directional print like I do, you want to grab the bottom end and fold it up by 1/2 inch and give it a good press. So I will take mine over to the iron and give it a good press, and you're going to do that for both of those strap pieces. So once that's pressed, you want to grab one of your foam pieces, and this raw edge that's not folded wants to be lined up with the foam up here, and you're going to place it on top of the line. So your folded edge is down at the bottom without the foam, and you just want to use a bit of double-sided tape to hold that in place on that line. So I'm just going to baste down that line. Don't worry, this stitching will be hidden later on. So now flip this over, and we want to mark another line 2 inches in from this other long edge of the fabric. Then you just want to fold it over to the line and give it a good press. Okay, so what we're now going to do is wrap it around the foam. So you just want to kind of press it with your hands, get it to sit nice and neat. and then bring this over. So you should then, you see, have like a nice neat edge to it. Go ahead and clip that in place all the way down. So you should only have one raw edge now up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch down this fold to pin it down, and then we're going to go across the bottom and up this side. We then want to come across and back down this side. And then lastly, we're going to sew another line of stitching over here that matches this line of stitching. So what I'll do is I'll just measure to check where mine is. So it should be, but it could be slightly different depending on the thickness of your fabric. But for me, it's about 1/2 inch. So I will sew another line of stitching 1/2 inch down this edge. That means that basically we're going to end up with 2 rows of stitching on both sides, and that's going to, because of the foam, give it like a really nice defined look and add some strength to those straps. Okay, so I've top stitched down the fold and a matching stitch line on this side, and then 1/8 inch on both long edges. And that should be your finished strap. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing with the second one. Okay, so those are your straps ready to go. Now we are going to attach the ladder locks. So you want to grab your 2 5-inch pieces of webbing and mark a line halfway down. Now, before you start, test on an offcut and make sure that your erasable fabric pen does erase, because they all work differently on different fabrics and it's always worth checking. So I'm going to put a little bit of double-sided tape on each side of my line, and then I'm going to wrap it around the top bar, just the top bar of the ladder lock. So we want this join to be on the back, so then it will be hidden, and you need to work out which way your ladder lock works, because they just work in one direction. So what I'm going to do before I go any further is check that this is the right side up, and that I want this to be on my strap like this. So the way that you do that, you put the longer piece of webbing up through the middle and then slide it through that bottom section. And then what should happen is when you pull on it, it should grip. Now it's not, you can see it's sliding right out. So turn it over, feed it up through the middle bar again and down through that little gap in the end. And this time, you can see it's the right way around, it's gripping it. Okay, so now I know that this is the front and I want it to be, that's my raw edge, there we go. I want it to be this way up on my strap. So I now know that I need to have my join on the back. What we're going to do is bring it down to that line that you marked and stick it in place. Okay, so there is my join on the back. That's how it's going to look, and when you yank it, you know you've got it the right way because it's staying tight. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And then what we want to do is we want to place it on this folded edge, and we're going to have it so the ladder lock is hanging off the edge. So you want to measure 2 inches up from the fold, and that's where you want it to sit, and you want it to be middle of the strap. And then we're going to mark it 1.5 inches down, and that's where we're going to sew up to. Oh, there we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to sew a box. So I'm going to sew a box here and across this 1.5 inch line, and then I'm going to sew an X through here as well, just to really add strength. So I recommend using a matching thread color so that it doesn't, you know, look messy. And then you can also add a couple of rivets if you want to for extra strength. And you're going to do the exact same thing on the other strap. So just one other thing to note, you've got like a fold on your strap. We're fitting the ladder lock to the side without the fold, so that this side will be on show when you're wearing the backpack. So there it is sewn on with the X in the box. Now, a lot of people don't like sewing the X because it looks kind of messy, but honestly, it is really going to add strength to your bag in the long run. So I definitely recommend doing it. And if you use a matching thread, you can see it's not that visible. So if you want to add rivets, they are again optional, but I would add them like so that they are inside the X and not going to go through any of the stitching, but so that you can fit 2 on each strap. So I'm just going to go ahead and repeat the same thing for my second strap. So those are the padded straps done. If you're using rivets for these, you will need long post rivets because it's quite a few layers to go through. So set those aside for a moment and grab your strap anchors. So these are slightly longer on one edge. So we're gonna fold this way so it becomes 2 inches tall. Give it a good press. You're then gonna fold it the other way. There you go. Okay. So you've now got yourself a square with an open top edge. Well, it's almost square. What you're gonna do is pop a piece of webbing into there so it's pushed up against the folded edge and clip that in place. And we're going to sew the entire square here, and we're going to do the same thing with this one. So you're folding it wrong sides together so that when this is completely folded like these are, it's just showing the right side of the fabric. And this one we want to be reversed. So this one, the webbing is pushed into the fold in the left, and this one, it's pushed into the fold on the right. So it's basically just flipped over. So that's your strap anchors done. Now we're ready to move on to the next step. Step 4 is the exterior back panel. The very first thing that we want to do before we even begin this step is to trim the exterior back panel down slightly. So the reason we're doing this is because we're going to add the laptop zip to it, and it's going to end up being bigger than the lining piece. So we're just going to trim 1/2 inch off the long edge before we begin. So it's just the exterior panel we're trimming, nothing else. Now we're ready to start this step. So for this step, you are going to need your 2 pieces of paracord if you're having the zip safety cord, your webbing grab handle, your completed padded straps, the luggage sleeve foam, the back strip foam, and the main panel foam. Don't worry, this is supposed to be shorter than the main panel, that's fine. Then you're going to have your exterior luggage sleeve piece, your exterior top strap closures, and your exterior main panel that we just trimmed. So the first thing that you're going to do is start off with your top strap closures. Now once again, we are going to be marking these down the center. So you want to mark this on the wrong side of the fabric, and then we're just going to fold these long edges in to the center line again. So you're going to do the same thing to create both of them so that this is the right side of the fabric and it's got nice folded edges. Then we're going to top stitch the 2 long edges with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so they're both top stitched at just 1/4 inch seam allowance. Set those aside for a moment. Now you're going to grab your main exterior panel. So this is the back panel. And what we want to do is measure from the top edge. So this is the right side up, and we're measuring from the top edge 7.5 inches and then drawing a line. So if you have a directional fabric, make sure this is from the top, and make sure that your fabric is right side up. So all of these marks we make, we want to be able to erase most of them later. This particular one will be hidden, but most of them we do just want to be able to use throughout this assembly. So use an erasable fabric pen, or for oilskin like this, I can rub the lines out afterwards. So grab your main panel stabilizer, and you'll see that it's smaller. So we're going to flip this over. So we're now looking at the wrong side of the fabric. Line it up with the bottom edge. Make sure it's centered, so it's an even gap on both sides, but it's lined up with this bottom edge. and then I'm just going to clip that in place. So because of all the layers and the pockets on this bag, it's really important that we keep the foam out of the critical areas. So this is where we're going to have zips, and we don't want the foam in the zips, and this is where we want the bag to fold over at the top, so we don't want the foam up there. So what we're going to do is we're going to baste it on the bottom edge, and then we're going to sew on the 7.5 inch line. So that line that we drew, we're going to sew, and that will help hold it in place. Don't worry, that line of stitching will be hidden later on. So next, I'm just going to sew one more line. Now this one is optional, but it's going to be hidden again behind the luggage sleeve. So if you're not having the luggage sleeve, don't bother with this one. But I like to baste my foam into place in as many places as possible so it won't move around. So I'm measuring 13.5 inches down, and I'm sewing a line across. Okay, so this is how it's looking. It's all basted in place. My foam's going to stay nice and still, hopefully. So what we're going to do now is fit the top closure straps, same as we did for the lower ones. So above this top line, so this is my top edge, and on the right side of the fabric, I am going to mark the center, and then I'm going to mark 3.5 inches out in each direction. So you can see now I've got my center line here, and I've got my 3.5 inch line on each side. I'm going to mark one more line, and it's going to be 5 inches down from the top edge. I'm going to mark it all the way across. So now I'm going to grab my top strap closures, and there is a wrong side to these. It is the side that has this raw edge here. So you want to be looking at the raw edge, and you're going to place it where the 5 inch line meets the 3.5 inch line, and just baste this short end here. I'm going to do the same thing on this one. So just like the lower straps, they're both inside the 3.5 inch line. Okay, so once that's basted in place, you can grab your strap sliders, and you want to put each one around the top bar. So if you've decided to use webbing and ladder locks, you'd again just be putting it through the top bar, so the rest of the ladder lock would be facing off here. But I'm just using strap sliders as per the pattern. So you're going to bring it back so that this end is on your 7.5 inch line. This is where all your lines are going to start coming into force. Okay, so it's going to be like this, and if you have some double-sided tape or something, you could put that down to keep it in place. But what I'm going to do, because the double-sided tape doesn't work with my fabric, I'm just going to make sure that I follow this line here and that it's lined up as I'm sewing it. And you're going to do the exact same thing with this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew with 1/8 of an inch up the long edge. We're going to stop about 1/2 inch before the strap slider. You can draw a line if you want to mark it, and then back down this long edge here. Okay, so I'm going to fit some rivets up here, but I'm going to do it later once the bag's assembled and I can go through more layers. So I would recommend leaving it till later. The more layers it goes through, the stronger it will be. So set that aside and grab your grab handle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it 3 inches in from each end using the raisable fabric pen as always. And then I'm going to fold it so that those marks match up, and I'm going to clip it along the middle. So you could have an unfolded one if you want, but I really like the look of a folded grab handle. Okay, so I'm going to sew between the two marks, back stitching really, really well to make sure that it's nice and strong. And then we will have our grab handle ready to fit. So grab your back panel, and we want the grab handle to go between the top strap closures. So it's going to sit on this 7.5 inch line that you sewed, and it's going to lie perfectly next to, but not overlapping, the strap closure. And what we're going to do is just sew it in place on this bottom short edge. So later on, the back strip's going to hide all of this. So just go ahead and really sew it and back stitch well, because it will add more strength to the grab handle. When you're fitting the grab handle, if you want to have the fold showing on the sort of front of the bag when people are looking at you wearing it, then you can fit it this way round. And if you want it showing on the back of the bag, then you can fit it the other way around. So you can just decide which way you want it to sit, because basically when the bag is being worn, that's what people are going to see. So you can choose. Okay, so we're going to mark one more line across here. It's going to be 6.5 inches down from the top edge. Okay, so I've got my 6.5 inch line here. And then I have also marked 2 inches out from the center, and you can see that is kind of on the grab handle. Okay, so what this is going to do is give us our placement for our main padded straps. So you want the fold of your straps to be facing up. So this is the fold edge, which means your webbing ladder locks will be sort of face down like this. Okay, so both straps are like this. We're going to place them on the center mark on the 6.5 inch line, and then on the 2 inch mark down here. So that what it's going to do is create a nice little angle for us, like so. Now you could pin that in place if you wanted to, or use some double-sided tape or something to hold it in place. What we're going to do is sew it on, give it a really good sew, good back stitch. The more stitching you do here, the better, because it's gonna have the back strip on top, so it's going to be hidden, but what it means is you'll have extra stitching to give it more strength and hopefully make your bag last even longer. So the other one is going to go in exactly the same position, coming down to the 2 inch mark, meeting at the center line and the 6.5 inch mark. Okay, so now we just want to fit our zip safety cords. Now these are only going to work if you have the correct style of zip. So before you fit these, just check your zips have some form of cutout. So the kind of zips you're looking for are anything where the cord will go through, especially once it's got your end cap on. Mine doesn't have the end cap yet. So any kind of circular zip. These are the ones I'm actually going to be using on this bag. So you can see it's got like a nice big circle, because basically we're going to be tying them closed so that people can't open the zips when you're wearing the backpack. Okay, so once you're happy with that, what you want to do is kind of find the middle of your strap. You're going to put the middle on the 6.5 inch line, 3/4 of an inch in from the edge, and just sew over it to hold it in place. And we're going to do the same thing with both sides. Okay, so grab your back strip. On the wrong side of the fabric, mark a line down the center, and then you're going to fold your long edges into that center line and press. So grab your back strip stabilizer, and it will be slightly narrower, so it's going to be inset by 1/2 inch on each side. And you want to slip that into your back strip. So I'm just going to clip that in place. You want it wrapped tight around the foam, but you might still have a little bit of a gap on the back like I have. So what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch this with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance in from each edge. So once that's top stitched, grab your back panel and you're going to draw one more line. This time it's 5.5 inches down from the top. So I've gone ahead and made my mark. And then what we want to do is like cover all of this up. So the zip safety cords are going to be going upward, as is everything else. And the back strip is going to go on that 5.5 inch line. There we go. And what it will do is just cover everything, all of the raw edges that you've got going on. So I'm going to go ahead and clip that on the sides. So you may want to stick this down with some fabric glue or something similar. But basically I'm going to make sure that mine is staying in line with my line that I've marked on the main panel. We're going to be sewing with 1/8 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch on both long edges, so that we're sewing through all of these layers. It is a lot of layers. You might need to use the hump jumper to get over the humps here, but the stitching that we're doing here is going to reinforce the strength of the straps and the grab handle. Okay, so that's all of your stitching done. That is now firmly fixed in place. So set that aside for a moment and grab your strap anchors. So you want to have the folded edges facing each other. And what we're going to do is we're just going to trim these down into triangles. Now you're going to grab your back panel again. And we want to mark it just 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom. And you're going to place one strap anchor on each side. So they should be opposites like this. So your webbing is pointing like an X. And we're just going to baste those in place. 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom edge. So I know I said baste, but really I sew these in and I backstitch really well, because the more stitching you can get on any of the strap points, the better. Now ready to work on the luggage sleeve. So grab your luggage sleeve and you're going to fold it right sides together. So this is the right side of the fabric. And you just want to clip that together and make sure that this is 12.5 inches wide, because this is almost a square. So this way should be measuring 12.5 inches. I'm going to sew this top edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so my oilskin is super oily, as you can tell from my hands. So sorry about that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is press this seam open. This is going to be a very waterproof bag with all of this oil. Okay, so what we do now is we turn this right side out, and we want the seam to be on the back so it will be completely hidden. You're going to slip your stabilizer in. So this is your luggage sleeve stabilizer. And like all of the others, it is slightly smaller and will be inset by 1/2 inch from each side so that it's not going to bulk up your seams. There we go. So slightly inset on each edge. Now we're going to top stitch with an 1/8 of an inch and a 5/8 of an inch on both long edges. Grab your back panel, and what we want is for this luggage sleeve to be just on top of the strap anchors. So it should be 4 inches up from the bottom edge. And you don't really want your straps going underneath it. So what we're going to do is lay it so it's right above but not overlapping. So now we're just going to baste that in place on the sides. That is your luggage sleeve. Should still be open top and bottom. This is so that you can put your bag on top of the handles of a large rolling luggage suitcase. So super handy when you're traveling. So that's your back panel done. We're ready to move on to the next step. Step 5 is the side panels. For this step, you are going to have one lining side panel, pattern piece B, 2 exterior side panels. Then you're going to have your 2 exterior bottle pockets, which is pattern piece D, and your 2 lining bottle pockets, and then a piece of elastic if you are using it for the interior bottle pocket. So for the interior bottle pocket, we're just going to grab the lining side panel. I'm going to make a mark 5 inches up from the bottom edge on each side. And then you're going to clip it just above that 5-inch mark. So this fabric is right side up, and we're just going to clip the elastic in place, and you can see it's a little bit wider than the panel, so it will stick up slightly. That is correct, because when you put a bottle on it, you want it to have enough room, but also to be nice and tight and hold the bottle in place. So what I'm just going to do is just baste these short edges. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside for a minute and grab my bottle pocket pieces. So these are for the exterior of the bottle pocket. And what we want to do is place each exterior piece right sides together with a lining piece. So the lining pieces don't have any interfacing on because we want to keep bulk to a minimum, but I can see this is the wrong side because it's where I labeled it. So those are now going to be right sides together, and we're just going to clip the top edge. And I'm going to sew those top edges with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now we want to press that seam open on the top. And then you're going to want to press that top edge to get a nice, neat finish. And then we're going to top stitch this top edge, but we're also going to baste the rest so that the lining and exterior are basted together. Do the same thing with your second bottle pocket. So you should be able to see, I like to leave the tiniest bit of the lining peeking up above the exterior fabric. I think it gives it a really cool look, almost like it's got piping, even though it hasn't. That means that then my lining's a little bit shorter. So I'm just gonna trim this tiny bit of exterior out so that they're exactly the same length. So now you wanna grab one of your exterior side panels. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna line it up with one side. So this is right side up, this is right side up. This is the top edge, so I'm matching it up to the bottom edge. And I'm just going to clip them together on this edge. And I'm going to baste that and do the same thing with your second pocket and side panel. So now with each pocket, we're going to match the other side up to the side of the side panel and just clip them together. Okay, so it's poking up, that's how we want it to be. And at the moment, the bottom is unsewn. We're just gonna baste the side edges. So the last thing we want to do is sort out this bottom edge, and we want it to be pleated. So I'm really lazy with my pleats. Some people measure them out and everything. I literally just kind of push it down until I'm pretty happy that that's about centered and about equal. Make sure that the lining is sitting nice and neat with it as well. A couple of my basting stitches have come out there. There we go. So I'm just eyeballing it, as people say. That gap looks about even. I am happy with that. So then I'm just gonna baste this bottom edge. Okay, so that's your two side panels for your bottle pockets. You can set those aside and we'll move on to the next step. Step 6 is the lining front panel. For this step, you're gonna have one of your main lining panel pieces, a 10-inch zip, your mesh pocket piece, your 2 pieces of zip binding and 1 lining zip tab. So we're just going to start with this lining zip tab. What we're going to do is we're going to cut it into 4 equal pieces. So each of them are going to measure 2 3/8 of an inch long. Once that's cut into 4 equal pieces, grab your zip, make sure that your zip pull is already on. And we're going to place a lining zip tab right sides together with the front of the zip. So that's the right side of the fabric is on the zip teeth. And you're going to clip another one on the back, and again it's going to be right sides with the zip. So the right side of the fabric should be on the zip, and then just clip those together. Do the same thing on the other end of the zip. So when you're looking at this now, this should be the wrong side of the fabric and this should be the wrong side of the fabric. So what we're going to do is we're just going to sew across the ends here with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now what we're going to do is press the zip tabs away from the zip like this, and you can just clip those together, and we're going to baste all 3 edges here, and then we're also going to top stitch the edge next to the zip. So do the same on both ends of the zip. So set your zip aside and grab one of your lining zip bindings. So I have drawn some lines on this so you know that this is the wrong side of the fabric. Because it's not interfaced, it's not really clear, but this is the wrong side. And what we want to do is fold it wrong sides together, and we're going to clip it to the top edge of our mesh pocket. Now this mesh pocket, it will stretch more in one direction. So I haven't got a lot of stretch this way, but I got loads this way. And we want it to stretch widthways. Okay, so this is the way around that you want it. You've got the top edge, and you're going to fold your zip binding wrong sides together and clip it to this top edge. So you're now looking at the right side of the binding, okay? The wrong sides of the fabric are inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew it to the top edge here using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So what we now want to do is push this up on that top edge. So you might just want to give it a press. I don't like to use my iron on this mesh fabric, so I just use my fingers. Press it on your stitch line. And then you're going to wrap this around to the back. So you can see now why we don't have any interfacing, because this would get really thick. So you're going to wrap it around so that the seam is completely covered. Okay, so we're going to sew this. I like to sew it from the front. I just get a neater finish then. It's going to be sewing through all the layers and holding it in place. So I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch from this bottom edge. So now what we want to do is place this on top of the zip. So your zip should be closing to the left. That seems to be the standard for bag making. And then we're just going to basically just plonk it on top there so that you've got like a nice little gap here between the teeth and the zip binding. And you could fix that in place with some double-sided tape to make sure it doesn't move. Then we're going to top stitch the top edge to sew it in place. So now we're ready to fit the top zip binding. So again, we're going to fold it wrong sides together. So this is the wrong side. The wrong side's going to be covered up. And then we are going to place this on the top edge of that zip and clip that in place. And we're going to sew that top edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Push that up away from the zip. And again, we're going to wrap this around so that it's going to cover the seam on the back. And then we're going to top stitch the edge closest to the zip. So this is now ready to go on the main panel. So grab your main panel and line it up with the bottom edge. Mine's got a bit of a skew-iff cut, so just make sure it's lined up with the bottom edge. And then what I would do is measure and mark and make sure that it's the same distance over here as it is over here, so your pocket will look straight once it's in the finished bag. So it should be 8 inches down from the top to this pocket, and then just clip the rest of the pocket in place. You may want to use some double-sided tape to hold this top edge down and make sure it stays straight. We're going to top stitch that with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to baste the other 3 sides with 1/8 of an inch as well. If you have any overhang where the fabric stretched a little bit or where you didn't cut it very well, like I didn't, just go ahead and trim it so the panel is the correct shape, and then you're ready to move on to the next step. Step 7 is the lining back panel and base. For this step, you're going to want your bag feet, if you're using them, your exterior base, foam base and lining base. Then you're going to have your small slip pocket and your large slip pocket and one of your main lining panels. So we're going to start with the small slip pocket. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to fold it in half, right sides together. So you're now looking at the wrong side of the fabric. So you're looking at the wrong side of the fabric and you're going to sew that top edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we need to turn it right side out. I am going to give the seam a little bit of a press first and then just turn it out through one of the sides. So I'm going to give that a good press with the iron. I'm going to have the seam on the top edge and I'm going to top stitch that top edge. Now set that aside just for a moment and grab your large slip pocket. And what you're going to do is fold it wrong sides together so that you're looking at the right side of the fabric this time. And just clip that together. And we're going to top stitch this top edge. So this smaller slip pocket is going to be for pens and like business cards, that kind of thing, credit cards, whatever you're using. So it's going to go on top of the large pocket. So I've measured and marked 2.5 inches up from the bottom edge. And then I'm going to place that on my mark and clip them together. So first of all, we are just going to sew the sides and the bottom edge with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you're going through both layers of the large pocket. So now we're ready to split this into smaller pockets. So for me, I'm going to have it with 4 card slots and then 2 small pockets for pens on the end. But you can customize this and split it however you want. So what I'm going to do is follow the pattern and sew a line up the middle, and then 2.5 inches out and 2.5 inches out. Same on both sides. So we're going to have 5 rows of stitching in total, and I'm going to back stitch well at the bottom and the top. So my lines are marked with an erasable fabric pen. I'm going to go ahead and sew those on the machine, and I'm going to be sewing through all the layers. So now we want to reduce the bulk in these corners. So what we're going to do is we're just going to trim out the middle layer. So you're leaving the front and the back intact. Then we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew that corner, and that will just hold the back of the pocket in place. Grab your main lining panel and place the pocket on top, lining it up on the bottom edge. So we're going to baste the side and bottom edges. And you can see here that these corners here are going to stop the pocket from having any holes in the bottom. That's why we sewed those angles. So this main pocket, we're going to sew up the center, making sure that we sew through that line of stitching for the card slot to create these two smaller slip pockets. Make sure at the top that you backstitch really well, because that is going to be under a lot of pressure as you use the pocket. So on this top section, as well as backstitching, you might want to add a rivet or something just to really reinforce it. So set that aside and we're going to start work on the base. So here are my base pieces, and I haven't created the curves yet. So if you use the pattern piece to create the curves, that's great. If you don't have a printer, you can always create the curves using like a jam jar or something that will create the same sort of size curves. The size of the curves is mentioned in the pattern on page 5. Once your curves are done, you're going to place the exterior piece right side up onto the foam. So the wrong side of the fabric is against the foam, and we're going to clip them together, and then we're going to baste around all the edges. You now need to mark the lines for your bag feet. These measurements are given on page 17 of the pattern. Now we're ready to fit the bag feet. Now obviously we want these bag feet to go on the exterior of the bag, but the lines show where it's going to go and we want it within the lines here. So you're not going to put the bag feet on the lines where they intersect. Instead, you're going to put them inside the lines. That means if you have huge bag feet like this, you can still use the measurements to put them in the right place and make sure that they're not too close to the seams. So these big ugly plastic feet they're kind of ugly, but they are really practical for a bag like this. And you can see then I can fit them inside the lines and keep them away from the seam. So that's all of my bag feet fitted. And now I'm going to place the lining base so that it's going to cover over the foam. It's pointing right side up. We're going to clip them all together and then baste. That's your base finished. Set that aside and we'll move on to the next step. Step 8 is the back panel assembly. For this step, you're going to need your exterior back panel, your lining side panel that has the elastic bottle holder, if you added that, and your lining main back panel. So this is the one with the slip pockets. And you're also going to need your two 16-inch zips, your two exterior zip tabs, and your lining zip tab, none of which should be interfaced. So we're going to start with these. Make sure that your zip pulls are already on, and if you are using the zip safety cords, then make sure you've got a zip pull that has some kind of hole for the cord to go through. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to chop these zip tabs down so that each of them is 7.5 inches long and then 2 inches long. So each of your zip tabs is now in 2 pieces. So you need to identify which is the top of your zip. So my zip is closing in this direction, so this is the top of the zip. I'm going to grab an exterior zip tab, place it right sides together on that top edge. Do that with both of your zips. And we're going to sew this edge with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. It is a bigger seam allowance than usual. It's because this zip is going to get a lot of wear, and we want to have a larger seam so that we can top stitch through it multiple times and make it extra strong. I've tested this bag a lot, traveling a lot with it, and I can tell you that this is a point where you're going to need the extra strength, so that's why we're using such a large seam allowance. So now you want to flip over just one of these zips and grab the lining zip tab, place it right side down on that zip. And now we're going to sew that again with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So this fabric, this is the right side touching the zip, and you're looking at the wrong side. Okay, so on both of these zips, what you want to do is push the zip tabs away from the zip. So you can press this with the iron if you want. Just make sure that they're pressed away. And we're going to be top stitching through here with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So we want 2 top stitches going through here just to add some extra strength to this seam that we've created. So on one of these, you're just going to be top stitching through the zip and the exterior zip tab, but on the other one, you're going through the lining zip tab as well. Okay, so we're now going to go ahead and do the same thing with the little zip tabs on the bottom edge. Okay, so both of these zips is going to have a small zip tab right sides together with it for the exterior. And then the one that has the lining fabric is going to have an exterior right sides together with the top of the zip and a lining right sides together with the bottom. And again, we're going to use a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on these. Again, we're going to push this away from the zip and top stitch it with a 1/4 of an inch and an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. What we're going to do on the zips is just to baste your lining and exterior zip tabs together on the zip that has both. So we're just going to baste the open edges. When we're assembling things like this in a pattern, I always like to make them a little bit too big, just in case you've cut your fabrics wrong, you've used the wrong seam allowance, you've got thick fabrics. It can sometimes come out a slightly different length. So just measure your zips now, and what you want is to have a total length of 22 inches. Just trim the extra off this long zip tab. Okay, so we're now ready to start attaching them. So grab your exterior back panel and grab the zip that has lining on the back, okay? So it has the lining zip tabs. And you're gonna place it right sides together with the exterior back panel. And this is the left side of the panel. You want your zip closing up, which means the long zip tab's gonna be at the top edge. And what you wanna do is just clip that together. And we're just gonna baste that zip in place. Now ready to attach the back lining panel. So this is the one with the slip pockets. We're gonna place it so it's right sides together with that exterior back panel. Line it up and clip it to the zip. So as we're assembling the bag, always match up the bottom edges. So if your panels, for some reason, maybe you haven't cut them quite accurately, like some of them are slightly different sizes, just line everything up on the bottom. Start from the bottom, make sure the bottom's correct for everything, and we can sort the top out later if you do have a problem. You shouldn't do, but we're not all perfect cutters. So what we're going to do now is sew this with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I use my standard presser foot so that it can press up against the zip teeth and give me a nice straight line. But you may need to use a zip foot depending on how wide your standard presser foot is. Trouble getting past your zip pull, I would just recommend doing a couple of back stitches, then coming away from it, move your zip pull, and then just start re-sewing from where you were. There's no harm in stopping to actually move the zip pull if you're struggling to fit it under your presser foot. So what I do now is press both fabrics away from the zip. So if you're just using cotton, you could use the iron for this. I've got myself my seam roller. Now, we're not going to be top stitching these seams because if we top stitch where the bottle pocket is, it will put too much strain on the stitching when you use the bottle pocket. So rather than doing that, what we're going to do is really press everything well. Now at this point, your lining is going to be wider than your exterior. That is correct because when we add the zip in later for this laptop pocket, it's going to make the exterior panel slightly bigger. So don't panic about that. What we're now going to do is we're going to get one of the exterior side panels. Make sure that your bottle pocket is at the bottom and keep your strap anchor out of the way. You're going to connect this right sides together with the other side of the zip and baste that together. To fit the lining side panel. So flip this over. So you're looking at the underside of the zip. Make sure that your bottle pocket elastic is toward the bottom of the bag. And now you're going to place this right side down on that zip. Again, line it all up on the bottom edge. That way, if you've got any stretch when you're sewing or your fabrics aren't cut quite right, then they're all gonna, come off the top and the bottom will be nice and neat. So now we're going to sew this edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So again, we want to press this all away from the zip, and you want to give it a really, really good press. So that's that side done. Now we'll move on to the next step. Step 9 is the laptop pocket and assembly. So you have got your remaining zip, your remaining lining side panel, your exterior side panel, your lining front panel, your 2 laptop pocket pieces, and your 2 foam pieces for those. So we're going to start with the laptop pocket pieces, and each one needs to be basted to foam, but the foam is 1/2 inch shorter on one edge like this. Okay, so make sure that you get it lined up with the other 3 edges and clipped together. So we're going to baste the foam to the pocket piece, but on this side we're going to do it with 3/4 of an inch seam allowance so that we catch the foam. This stitch line will show inside the pocket, but I'm pretty sure no one's ever going to notice it, and if you use a matching thread it will be fine. Just make sure that you sew a nice neat line as you're doing it. So 3/4 of an inch seam allowance on this edge here, and the rest will be 1/8 of an inch baste. So once those are basted, grab your back panel. Now we want to access the other side of the exterior panel. So you can see I've got my lining out of the way. I'm just working with the exterior piece here. And what you want to do is place your remaining zip right sides together with it. And you want the long zip tab to be at the top. So go ahead and clip that to that edge of your exterior panel and just baste that in place. Your zip is now basted in place, so grab one of your laptop pocket pieces and place it right side down on the zip, so it should just about match up with the actual zip tape. And you want this edge that doesn't have foam in it to be on the zip. We're going to match it up with the zip tape, clip them together. And you're going to sew from the bottom all the way to the top with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you're going to sew the whole length, not just this pocket piece. So again, we're going to give these a good press away from the zip. Now you're going to grab your remaining exterior side panel, make sure that the bottle pocket is at the bottom, and you're going to clip it right sides together with the other end of the zip. And then we're just going to baste that in place. Okay, so once that's basted, just flip this over. So you've got the underneath of the zip. Grab your second laptop pocket piece and place it right side down on the underside of the zip. And again, it should line up with the zip. So it should be the same length, and you should just be able to clip it to the zip. Baste the pocket piece in place. So now that's basted, the pocket pieces are right sides together. So you want to pull these 2 up and just line them up and clip them together. So what we want to do is sew the pocket pieces together using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you want to get as close as you can to the zip, but you will find that your machine will only let you get so far. Mine will let me get really, really close, and there will be the tiniest little gap. If you really want to, you could always hand sew that closed, but I can assure you as a laptop pocket, your laptop's not going to fall through that gap, so you will be just fine. So I'm going to sew as close as I can get on each side to here and sew the pocket pieces together. But if you really want to, you could hand sew that last tiny bit together. Now what we need to do, so your laptop pocket should sit against your back panel here. And we're going to bring the back lining panel over. So we're bringing it over toward this seam where we've got our side panel. Okay, so it's going to hide your laptop pocket. Bring it over, match it up to the seam and clip it together. Baste that edge. Just make sure that your bag looks like this. So it's got the exterior back panel facing out and the lining back panel facing out. This is where you are getting to the thickest part of the bag. If you followed the instructions for the interfacing, you're going to be glad, because you don't want any extra stabilizer or interfacing in this section. Okay, so the last piece to go on here is going to be the lining side panel, and you're going to place that right sides together with your lining back panel. Go ahead and clip those together. Okay, so this is where it's getting quite thick. This is the thickest it's going to get, which is why we kept the stabilizer out of the seams. So we're just going to sew this on with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you really need to, you could always trim some of the interfacing out of the seams, but if you followed the instructions in the cutting chart for the interfacing, you should be okay. So this is one of the hardest bits. It is a lot of layers. So just watch out that your exterior fabrics aren't getting kind of like folded up underneath. Make sure that everything's still laying flat. And if you need to stop when you reach the zip pull and then restart, then that's absolutely fine. So now we're just going to push this away from the seam again, like we have done on all the other sides. So the reason we don't top stitch this is because if you have your top stitching coming down here, it will be going over the bottle pocket. Then when the bottle pocket gets used, it will pull the stitching out. And if we're not going to have top stitching on this side, then there's no point having it on this side, as it would look slightly mismatched. So this is how your bag's looking now. You've got your two exterior side panels attached to your exterior back panel, and the same with your lining. So we're ready to fit the remaining panels. We'll start with the lining front panel. Make sure that you've got it the right way around, so the bottom of the pockets are together. We're going to place it right sides together and clip it to one of the lining side panels. So clip it all the way down this long edge. Just attached to the lining side panel, and we're now going to sew that with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that is attached, we are going to attach it to the other lining side panel. And again, make sure that you don't attach it to the exterior, you're just attaching it to the lining side panel. Go ahead and clip those together. Now we're going to sew that long edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so your lining now looks like this. It's all attached to itself. Now we're going to finish off the exterior. So make sure that you keep like your straps out of the way, your zip cords out of the way, and you're going to need your exterior front panel. So again, make sure it's the right way up. Make sure that the bottom, is with the bottom of the exterior back panel. And what we're going to do is line it up with one of the side panels and clip them together. So we're going to go ahead and sew that together with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So that is the front panel to the side panel. I'm also going to sew another row of stitching just inside the seam allowance to add some strength, but I'm going to start it about an inch up and finish it an inch from the top. That is because I want to be able to press my seams open afterwards. So now we need to attach this front panel to the other side panel. So bring those right sides together and go ahead and clip them together. And I'm going to go ahead and sew that with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then again, I'm going to do my other stitching within the seam allowance, but a little bit from the top and bottom, so about an inch in. Okay, so what you now have is an exterior and lining that are separate, like this. So what we want is for them to be together. And in order to do that, we want the exterior on the inside. We're going to grab the bottom of the lining and pull it through. And as you do this, the rest of the bag will follow. So if you're using a really stiff fabric, this is going to be much harder. And I would recommend trying to warm it up with a hairdryer or something. It works well with faux leather and wax canvas, but just be really careful that you don't get too close to your fabrics. Be really careful that you don't have it on a super high heat. You're just trying to make it warm so it's more malleable. Okay, so my exterior is now inside my lining. And the next thing we want to do is match up all the seams. So you want to press them open on the lining and the exterior, match them and clip them together. Now, if your bottom edge should match up because we lined everything up with the bottom edge, but if your top edge is a bit messy, then you might need to trim it later. But what we're going to do is just kind of work with the base first. The base should be perfect, and then if there is any messiness, it will be on the top edge and we can deal with it then. But first of all, we just want to clip it all together. So on the back here, you will notice that it won't, you won't be able to press your seams open. They'll naturally go in one direction because of the zips. So that is absolutely fine. You can see here, my top is really wonky. So I'm just going to trim mine so that the whole thing is the same size, so that it all matches the exterior, because the exterior has ended up a little bit smaller. So the bottom of my bag is all clipped together. And then I can see more clearly kind of where I'm going wrong on the top. Now, you shouldn't actually have this because both your panels are cut the same size, but mine never fit correctly. I believe it's to do with it's stretching as you're sewing it, that kind of thing. So don't worry if it's not quite right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trim it down so that it's all the exact same height all the way around. Okay, so now it's all totally straight. I'm just going to rematch my seams on the front there and clip them together. So for your back seams, you've got the zip tabs here, so it should just all kind of sit neatly already, and the seams should just fall into place where they ought to be. So just clip it all the way around the top. So now what we're going to do is baste the bottom edge and baste the top edge, and watch out and just make sure that you're not sewing through any of your straps or your zip safety cords or anything like that. Okay, so you can feel that the base is harder to do because of all the layers. That's why we trimmed so much out. So when we do the base binding, it is going to be a little bit more difficult, whereas the top trim is going to be a lot simpler. So if you haven't already fitted rivets here for your top straps, then I would recommend doing that now so that you can do it through all of the layers, including the lining, and add some extra strength to it. So the top trim is going to be fitting slightly underneath here, which is why we're putting the rivet below the stitch line. You do not want to put the rivet up here because then you won't be able to attach your top trim. And we do want these to have a little bit of movement so that it's easy to get the straps undone. Step 10 is the final assembly. For this, you're going to need your main bag, your base, your exterior top trim, and your lining base binding. So we're going to start with the base, and what we want to do is mark the centers. So the easiest way to do this is to just fold it in half. And then I'm going to do a really small snip with the scissors. Just creating like a triangle so that I can see the point where my center is. So I'm going to mark the centers on all 4 edges. So we now need to mark the centers on the bottom edge of the bag. This is more difficult because the back panel is actually slightly larger than the front panel. So the side panels are going to kind of curve around a little bit to the front. So first of all, mark the center on your front panel. That's nice and easy. You just need to mark the center between where it joins the 2 side panels. Now you need to mark the back panel. Now the back panel includes the zip tab here. Okay, so we're going from the side panels really. You're going to bring where the side panels begin together, and then the back panel will be the center from there. So once your front and back centers are marked, you can bring those marks together and go ahead and clip it. And then from there you can work out the side centers. So you'll see it's not actually the center of the side panel, so that's why we've got to do it this way. Okay, so now we're ready to attach the base, and we're just going to start with one side first. So let's start with the front. We're going to match the center. So it's going to be the exterior of the base together with the exterior of the bag. okay? And we're going to match the center mark on one of the long edges to the center mark on the front panel and clip that together. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark a line 5 inches out from the center on the base, okay? Just a tiny little mark, okay? I'm guesstimating mine because I haven't got my ruler handy, but there you go. So it should be about there. It will be before it curves. So once you've got that marked, you want to clip all the way along. And what we're going to do is we're just going to baste from mark to mark. So we're going to baste the straight edge on. Okay, so now we want to grab the base and pull the other side toward the back panel. So again, you want to match up your center marks, find those, and clip that together. Okay, so again, we're going to sew 5 inches out from the center on each side. So it's before it hits the curve. So you're going to start to see now why we've been trimming so much out and why in the cutting chart I say about not interfacing certain pattern pieces, because this is starting to get chunky. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to baste from mark to mark, just the 10 inches along this straight edge. So now we're ready to match up the side center marks. So as you match these up, you will find that you need to snip in slightly to the main panels. Okay, so let me show you this from the other direction. Okay, so you see it's kind of like this needs to spread out. Now the reason we do that on a curve is because the circumference that you're sewing is actually smaller, so we need to spread it out. So what we're going to do is snip little snips, about 1/4 inch into the curve, and then we'll be able to spread it out around the curve and clip it in place. So I've got a blog on the website about this, about the mathematics behind curves and why we end up snipping to get it to fit. Because if we don't, we're going to end up with a lot of puckers. Okay, so that's my base clipped in place on that side. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and then we're going to sew the whole base on with 3/8 inch seam allowance. I generally find it easiest to do it with it this way up on my machine. You are going to have to kind of wrestle it through a little bit because it is a lot of layers and you've got this huge bag attached to you. Just take your time. If you need to, you can hand baste the curves first. Just use some like messy hand stitching to hold it in place so it doesn't move, or you could staple it if you prefer. But if you do that, be very careful of the staples that you don't sew through them. Once your base is attached, you might just want to neaten up like all the loose threads, but that's up to you. We're going to cover it with binding soon. So just set that aside for a moment. And grab your your base binding and your top trim. Now, although these are different sizes, we're going to assemble them the same way. So for both of them, we're going to fold them in half. So you're folding it wrong sides together so that the right side of the fabric is on the outside. You're going to fold it down the whole length and give it a good press. So if you're using cotton like this one, give it a press with the iron. So now what we're going to do is unfold them and fold the long edges into the center line. But you don't quite want to touch the center line. You want to be a little bit off from it. So you can hopefully see I've got a tiny gap there. And then if I put a tiny gap on the other side too, then it just means it's not going to meet the center line and it's not going to bulk up too much. So we're going to press that all the way down. Do the same thing with both the lining and the top trim. Okay, so then we're just going to refold it on that center line. So you've got your lovely no raw edges, 4 layers thick with all your creases from pressing. Okay, so now what we're going to do is you're just going to unfold it for a moment so that you can join the ends. So we want these creases beforehand because it's really awkward trying to do it afterwards. What you're going to do is you're going to fold it so that it's right sides together and so that you don't have any twists. And you're going to place it at this 90-degree angle. Okay, so the fabric is right sides together, which means right now I'm looking at the wrong side of the fabric here, on this bit just here. And what I'm going to do is mark where this corner is, just here. And then I'm going to draw a line to join my corners, like that. We're going to sew along this line, and once you've sewn along this line, you see you'll end up with a continuous piece of fabric. So make sure that you back stitch at the beginning and end here. And we're going to do the exact same thing with the lining piece. So you're just going to unfold the ends, place it right sides together at that right angle. And for this one, I'm just going to mark it again, marking that line to join this corner here to that corner underneath there, so that once we sew that line, we'll have a continuous piece of fabric. So what you can do now is trim off the excess. And then you want to press this seam open so that it's going to lay nice and flat. Then we're going to refold the whole thing. So you might find that you just need to give it a little press around these areas where it's got the join. Okay, so there's your top trim. Got the open side and the closed side. So that one's all ready to go. And we've got the same with our base binding. So just make sure you've got no twists. So you can see my open edge runs all the way around. So that is now ready to fit. Okay, so everybody has their own way of doing binding. For me, I definitely cheat with this. This is my method. I prefer it, other people don't. So you can try different methods. Some people sew it on one side, then wrap it around to sew it on the other side. I like to do it all in one go. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to make sure my join is on one of the side panels where there's the least amount of bulk. So I will wrap that around my seam and clip it in place. And what I do is I literally just wrap it around the entire seam, making sure that it's covering my stitching on both sides. And then I clip it around the whole thing at once. So this is my method. Everybody is different. You've got to figure out what works best for you. I would recommend trying to attach it in opposite sides first, and then just making sure that it's even going around the whole thing. If you're struggling to fit it around your seam, you could always trim your seam down very slightly if for some reason your seam is a little bit too big. But you should just be able to clip it around the whole way around the base. Okay, so you're now ready to sew the base on. I strongly recommend using a matching thread color for your binding. That way it's going to look much neater. And if you kind of like miss a little bit, you can always come back and do a second row of stitching and no one will be able to see it. So that is my lazy method for binding. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to sew it on with 3/8 of an inch all the way around. I'm going to use an awl to kind of hold it in place and make sure it doesn't slip out of the way as we go. This is the hardest part of making this bag, so don't give up, and if you need to take a break halfway through, go ahead. It is difficult because the bag is kind of massive and getting in the way of the sewing machine, and the bag feet will also be making it slightly more difficult if you use them. So just take your time, go slowly, don't be afraid to take a break. And you know, if you don't quite get the perfect stitch and the perfect seam allowance first time, go around a second time. There's no harm, and if you use a matching thread, it won't be visible. Okay, so that's your base binding attached. Not the neatest stuff I've ever done, but you know, it's on and it serves a purpose, and really nobody's going to see it. So don't panic about your base binding. So what we're going to do next is fit the top trim. Now this is where we do want to make sure that it's neat, okay? So what I'm going to do is mark a line around the top edge, and it's going to be 7/8 of an inch down. So I'm going to use an erasable fabric pen for this. So it's just under an inch. And the purpose of this is that when we fit the top trim, we want to make sure, because the top trim is going to come down about an inch. So we want to make sure that the line is covered on both sides. So that's the lining and the exterior. And that way we know that our top trim is fitted correctly. So I'm going to mark the exterior fabric in the same way, 7/8 of an inch down from the top. So grab your top trim, and again we're just going to plonk it on top basically. But we want to make sure that this, because it's quite thin compared to the base, we want to make sure it's all the way up in that top trim. And you know that because it will cover the line, whereas if it's not covering the line, that means you need to push it further onto the bag. So clip that in place all the way around. And again, you might want to place your seam join on your top trim somewhere on the side so it's not quite so visible. You would think that the back of the bag would be the right place, but actually the back of the bag will fold down and be on the front of the bag when it's closed, so I wouldn't recommend putting it on the back. So on the front, where your top strap closures are, you should be able to get the top trim all the way on there, and your sliders will kind of lift out the way just so that you can stitch this in place. So check all the way around, make sure that your line isn't showing on the inside or the outside, because if it is, that means it's not sitting correctly. So make sure it's sitting correctly all the way around, it's nice and tight. Now, if you're going to have a magnetic snap closure, that is when you want to fit it now, and you want to fit it to the inside of the trim. So on the front and the back, you want to fit it on this lining side. You would fit your magnetic snap so that it goes through the top trim, but does not go through the fabric. You're just fitting it to the top trim. So the reason you would fit a magnetic snap. Here are two finished bags. And as you can see, this one, it doesn't always sit completely flush when it's folded over, which is absolutely fine. But if you do want it to sit flush, the magnetic snap on this one means that it stays together in the middle and keeps the whole thing kind of more even. It also means that when the bag is undone, your magnetic snap is going to like keep the top closed. So even if your bag is like this, it's just going to keep it closed at the top. So that is why you might want the magnetic snap. It is completely optional in this pattern. It is a little bit more difficult to top stitch with the magnetic snap there, so it's completely optional. It's up to you. You can decide. If you do fit it, make sure it's completely centered on the top trim, so your top stitching is as easy as possible. Or another option could be to fit a rivet backed magnetic snap afterwards. That's what I'm going to do on this video one today to show you how to do that. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to top stitch the trim in place. I'm going to top stitch the bottom edge and the top edge. Gonna make sure before I start that it's folded correctly, sitting correctly all the way around on both the exterior and the lining. But let's be honest, the exterior is the most important. Okay, you're almost there. So that is your top trim attached. Now we need to turn the bag right side out. Check the base first of all. Yep, I've got a few loose threads, but you want to make sure that you haven't got any of your like basting stitches showing or anything on your base. So, you know, you don't want to have any basting stitches showing along the edges here. So push it all out all the way. Don't underestimate what a good press can do. It really helps when you push the seams out and give it a press. So if you have used the paracord zip safety ties, you can go ahead and add your paracord end caps on now. I'm still waiting for mine to arrive, but most of them just sort of stick on. You can use glue, and then they have a little screw to hold it in place. And then what they do is keep your zips tied up when you're wearing the bag so that it's more difficult for people to get in. So your bag should naturally fold over from the foam in the back panel. So the foam only comes up to about here. And what should happen is that your bag should naturally fold over it. So if you fitted a magnetic snap, this bit will kind of hold itself closed all the time. So I'm going to fit a rivet magnetic snap in a minute, but first of all, we are going to finish off these straps. So what you want to do is you want to grab your bottom, your lower strap. You want it kind of pointing toward the center of the bag, okay? So this is the top. When it's pointing in to the center of the bag, this is the top bit. And you want it to go up through the middle and back down through the bottom one. See, so it won't have any twists or anything like that. And then when you tug on the bottom one, it will lock into place. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just use a lighter on the end here just to stop it from melting over time, because this is a nylon webbing. Sorry, stop it fraying over time. And then I'm going to hide the raw edge by double folding like this. Then I'm just going to go ahead and fit a rivet through that to hold it in place. But if you're not using rivets, you just need to sew a box and an X to hold that in place. So that will be the end of the strap, so it now can't accidentally slip through there. I'm going to set that on the rivet press, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with the other side, although I have just realized that I've been using the wrong strap. So pop that off. It's the end of a long tutorial, can you tell? Okay, this is the one that should be going through this one. And this one needs to be going through the strap that's on the same side as it. It's logical, isn't it? So there you go. I will set that on the rivet press, do the same with this side, and that's my straps done. So I'm going to show how to fit a rivet magnetic snap to the front here. So first of all, what I want to do is mark the center on the top trim. And then I'm going to punch a hole through that center mark, and it's going through all the layers. So these rivet backed magnetic snaps are a little bit different because they have a rivet back, as you can imagine. So what you do is you pop that, so the magnetic snap's on the inside and the cap is on the outside. And then I'm going to fit the female part exactly the same on the other side. So that's going to be my magnetic snap closure. This is just slightly easier because you can fit it after you've done the top stitching. But again, it's totally optional. You can go ahead and skip the magnetic snap altogether if you want to. Is with its magnetic snap finished. So there's the finished bag. Look at that. Okay, I just need to give it a little bit of a press. I might just hair dryer this to get the creases out a little bit because it works really well on oilskin. So I might just do that and then I'll show you the finished bag. So there you have the finished bag. I really like it. I'm really, really happy with this one. My sister's already bagsied it. It's turned out really nice. So I hope you've enjoyed making it. I know it's a bit of a marathon, but I think it's worth it. So I hope you do too. So what are we going to be making next at Country Cow Designs? We've already got the next pattern planned. This will be, I think, released 1st of November. And it's going to be a sling pattern. So this pattern is going to have like detailed instructions for if you want to scale the pattern, because we want it to go big and then have the option to go smaller for different size. So this is the bottle sling. So as you can imagine, it's designed to hold a bottle. It's got a nice padded back. It's designed for like hiking and things. There you go. So there's the full size version on me. But remember that I'm not a small person. Here's a 90% version with my hot chocolate bottle in it. So this is quite a small bottle. So you can fit massive bottles. A lot of the testers have like 12-inch tall bottles that they're putting in the full size version. So yeah, this will be coming up soon. It's going to be a fun make and it's a lot quicker. So Join us soon. Make sure that you turn on notifications so you know when the video for this one comes out. See you soon. Bye.